This video is going to be a film study slash commentary look at how Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions front office have refused to give ground, refused to budge at all in creating depth and getting as many high quality players in the building that want to be there. I think they've done a great job in the last 4 or 5 days of supplementing the roster to try to create more depth and give Aaron Glenn options, particularly on the defensive side of the ball, obviously where there's so many injuries. Recent losses: Malcolm Rodriguez, Josh Pascal, Wingo, Anzarike. A ton of talent missing over there. It's crazy that the Alex Anzalone injury seems like 2 months ago, and it really wasn't that long ago. Do I think that the Lions defense at a certain point could reach a level of injury catastrophe where there's just too many guys out and you're unable to run the scheme that Aaron Glenn wants to run? Sure. I mean, it's possible. At a certain point, if injuries were to continue at this rate, of course it would be unsustainable. That's why I think the front office went out and signed these 4 guys to restock, give Aaron Glenn options, like I said, and create competition. To be honest with you, I think 2 of these guys are brought in to compete with each other and possibly other players that are already on the roster or the practice squad. I think that they've improved or given the potential to improve their nickel and dime looks with Jamal Adams as a boundary side hybrid guy in obvious passing situations, in my opinion. Jamal Adams, Quan Alexander, Jonah Williams, who I don't have film of for this video, and then Miles Adams, who actually played in Detroit earlier this year as a member of the Seahawks. We're going to start this video off with talking about Adams' film and showing some of his coverage against tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs. I don't think that Adams is being brought in to be a safety, but nonetheless, there's considerable film out there of him, number one, in Tennessee, but in Seattle last year. His use as a dime linebacker seems to be the clear play here. We even already have word that he's practiced at the, quote, linebacker position or doing linebacker drills. I think that's the idea. Dime, nickel-positioned defender, although the nickel slot corner, if you will, has been Amik Robertson pretty much all year long. As it relates to Jamal Adams, he's tough. I don't think he's a safety at this point in his career. Like I said, previously he had been a playmaker at other stops in the NFL. Tough player, good tackler in space. I think when he can play with his heels walled up, meaning he's playing at his depth or forward, that he's a better player at this point in his career than as a safety on the back end. Not that there wasn't some decent film of him in 2023 as a safety at times. You see a couple of instances of it earlier in this video. Overall, it's a depth signing for the Lions at this point. He's experienced. He's played across multiple levels of the defense, multiple locations. I think as a dime, and if you're unsure of what I mean by dime linebacker, by the way, this is film from last year against the Ravens. Ball's on the left hash. You have 5 DBs on the field, typically, against 11 personnel. There's your 5 DBs, 2 corners, 2 safeties, 1 nickel defender to the field. And then in this case, he is the dime linebacker. So the 6th DB on the field, but lined up in a linebacker position to the boundary, essentially over the top of the running back, creating a little bit more versatility than maybe guys like Anzalone and Rodriguez did. And I will say this, from an athletic standpoint, he's similarly athletic to those guys, in my opinion. He definitely has a good pursuit, and it sounds like he has a good perspective on this opportunity. It almost sounds as if Detroit contacted him to give him the opportunity, and he jumped at it. I know that may sound weird, the quotes that he said, talking about Detroit being a high-class organization. I mean, you are at this point. If you didn't know that already, you're really late to the game as a Lions fan. Replacing Anzalone, you can't do. Rodriguez was doing a nice job of it, I think. A reasonable facsimile, let's put it that way, before he got injured and now is out for the year. I think that Jamal Adams is there to compete with Quan Alexander, who is a 30-year-old inside linebacker. He's been with multiple teams recently. Same thing applies for Jamal Adams. These are clips of him playing downhill and or playing with his heels capped or his heels walled, meaning you're not backpedaling, you're playing at depth, coming downhill. Do I think he can play inside linebacker better than David Long on a 3-down usage? No, not at all. He's not an inside linebacker, hasn't been so. He will play and tackle better out in space, in my opinion. Will he cover better out in space? I'm not sure. I mean, there's certainly plays of him not covering well with the Seahawks last year. Believe me, I have enough film of that. There's plenty of film from last year, just like the plays that you just saw here, whereby he's coming downhill, attacking, and can have an impact, particularly against the run. I do want to talk about Quan Alexander, who is a guy that has over 600 tackles in his career. Does he retain his athleticism? That, to me, would be the big question, or the big factor here, trying to figure out how much you can get accomplished with Quan Alexander on the field. You got David Long, Jamal Adams. Jack Campbell is already there, a guy who will play to the field generally. I thought Turner played well last week. He had a split sack with Zadarius Smith, if I recall. To relate things to Alexander, we have film of him from this year and some from last year playing well. He's only played 3 games for the Broncos at this point. He fits things well against the run. I think he, in my opinion, matches up well being lined up next to Jack Campbell. He's a runner and things out in space. He's got great speed and great burst. Also underrated, if you ask me, in here. In the box, playing against the run, being physical. Also, he has a considerable amount of forced fumbles and fumbles recovered in his career. Played a long time for being 30 years old. I think that him and Adams are going to compete against each other for time on the field, in my opinion. I don't think this is 4 separate signings. My suspicion is this is 3 of them. And Alexander and Adams have been brought in to fight with each other to try to get on the field consistently, on the field on passing downs. He seems really adept at fitting the run. I think the film kind of displays that. I didn't have to look very hard. I actually had film of him against the Ravens from earlier in the year when Denver came in there and got hammered. This is a unique look that Denver's giving. The cool thing is when I get to look at, quote, new players for a team, I kind of rediscover certain things that I didn't maybe notice when I was scouting. Watch what they do with the 2 inside linebackers here. They almost kind of stack them. You can see that this is quite intentional. And I think they're doing this to match or deal with the H-back / tight end coming across the field. But Alexander does a great job of tempoing things here. It's almost like he knows the running back is going to come back across the grain of this zone or split zone concept, if you will. So I think he fits the run well. Do the Lions really need help stopping the run? No, I really don't think so. They're exceptional at it. He did force a fumble this year against the Ravens. It was late in the game against us. He forced a fumble, in fact, by Derrick Henry. He takes on blocks well. There doesn't seem to be anything that Quan Alexander isn't capable of doing. These are small sample sizes, of course, from 2024 and even from 2023, some of the film that I had there. I think he gets to the football extremely well. I think he offers scheme versatility, meaning you can wrong arm things with the front side guy and then fast flow him over the top because he has the speed to get that done. I'll pull this back a couple of times and I'll let you see how the front side inside linebacker takes on this ISO block, this lead block. So you've got guard pulling, and watch what the linebacker does. He goes to the inside such that allows Quan Alexander to fold over the top. I mistakenly called it an ISO block. I thought it was Pat Ricard because of such a big guy. In this case, it's a left guard, Andrew Voorhees. Oftentimes, the frontside inside linebacker will be taken on the outside shoulder, keeping his own outside shoulder like further in this direction towards the sideline. Not where those arrows are located, but keeping his outside arm free, letting the backside guy fit underneath. This is the opposite. They're wrong-arming this against a puller. I mean, we taught that as well with our frontside inside linebackers. If you got a fullback, set it inside to the outside shoulder. If you got a lineman, spill it, wrong-arming it. Let the other guy with speed get over the top. I just love when I see a linebacker put their foot in the ground here, and that's where it stays and redirects him. Gets involved in the tackle with Henry. I think this might be the one where there's a fumble and the Ravens were able to recover it. Do I think that he ends up playing 30, 35 snaps a game for the Lions? Well, you hope not, because that would mean that there would be some other injuries. But if you did have to have him on the field for a while, number one, if he's clean, he'll get to the ball. If he's clean, meaning unblocked and doesn't have to deal with anything or navigate it, he'll get to the football wherever the point of attack is, from one sideline to the other. I think, yes, he does retain his athleticism at 30 years of age, at least in my opinion, based upon the film that I have. And finally, he's got a great motor. It gets to the football, whether he's clean and or dealing with offensive linemen. In this case, it's the right tackle for the Ravens, Roger Rosengarten. I do not have the end zone angle, so it'll be the right tackle here that gets up to him, and I'll slow-mo it from here, from the engagement. Ravens clearly didn't do a great job of blocking out there on the edge. I think you got a good football player for a guy who, at this point, if Alex Anzalone was able to return, and you have Jack Campbell, Anzalone, and David Long Jr., then Quan Alexander probably is clearly the number 4 guy. Him or Jamal Adams, in my opinion. I don't know how many they would keep on the roster active on game days, especially with Turner being a guy who looks capable, looks young, and fiery, gets to the football as well. I don't have any film of Jonah Williams other than him playing limited snaps this year for the Rams, and prior to that, he had played with 2 other teams in the last year and a half. I do have a little bit of film of Miles Adams, a rotational piece, defensive tackle, defensive end, hybrid type guy. The Seahawks came to town and used him. I think he played 23 snaps that game. Maybe it was as low as 18. 3 tackles. Doesn't seem to be able to escape offensive linemen individually from a move standpoint unless it's part of a stunt, part of an exchange, or in this case, it's a pick. You get the end zone angle. He does provide pressure on Jared Goff here. He's not the guy who finishes off the play, however, on this 3rd down. Well before the Seahawks traded to get Ernest Jones the 4th, so you can see they're in a dime configuration with their linebacker Dotson on the field, who is since gone. This is 95. Miles Adams, he gets a pick from 90. The Lions' offensive line does a nice job passing it off. He is able to escape the left guard. Ends up on the ground. 90, the other D tackle, who was the picker, gets the sack. He doesn't appear to me to have significant usage as a pass rush guy. I think this is a depth signing for defensive tackle / defensive end situations. Wingo, Onwuzurike, all coming out of the game last week, along with clearly the bigger loss, Josh Paschal. He does get to the football. So there is something here that I think carries over with 3 of these guys. The 2 that I have filmed, 2 of the guys I have film of, and then Jamal Adams, I think, has made a significant number of plays in his career. We should assume that he is willing to get after the football and pursue and collapse down. But Adams and Quan Alexander, both are high motor guys. Fits right in with the Lions, if you ask me. Looks like a zone scheme to this side, so he's reacting to it. He reads and reacts to blocks well, meaning he honors his keys. He doesn't guess. Some defensive linemen in the NFL are looking for sacks. This is that weird play-action play where Goff kind of booted out in this direction and brought it back to St. Brown underneath. And this is Adams and other guys as well. Dotson is there to make a tackle. I'll let you guys see it one more time. When you say that guys react to blocks, that's a compliment, because some players just get upfield. They just burst upfield without reacting to a block. This is an influence trap that it's got to be weird for you guys to be watching Lions film, scouting a player who was playing against you that now theoretically could be suited up on Sundays, or at least have an opportunity to. He reacts to blocks well. This is an influence trap. So the tackle, Sewell, is stepping down to him like he's going to pin down on Adams, and then the guard is pulling out in that direction. So what that does is it influences or encourages him to engage Sewell. All that does is actually widen him up for the trap block, hence the name influence trap. Now the cool thing about this is, from a Miles Adams standpoint, is he is influenced, tricked, if you will, and trapped, but he bounces off of it, redirects, and he is the first player to make contact with Jahmyr Gibbs on this trap concept. Really nice example of great contact balance, even if it's not fundamental the way that he took on the block. Influence trap is a pain. It's a real pain in the butt to try to deal with. You get a great illustration of it here from the end zone angle. So that's Adams spot shadowed or circled, and he's going to get trapped. How they get it accomplished, or how they normally would get it accomplished, would be to down block him with the tackle, pull out here to the exterior or the edge with the right guard, and trap or kick someone else. So that is what he's responding to post snap. He's thinking that he's got to follow or try to fight over the top with Zeitler. In fact, he's getting trapped and then redirects off of it. Could it be a better block by 74? Of course. I still think that this is an illustration of the type of player that you could get in limited reps or limited opportunities on the field if you had to throw him out there. I think the larger point here is that Brad Holmes went and got two veterans who have made plays in the NFL. Jamal Adams, it's been a while. Of course, Quan Alexander has one fumble forced this year against the Ravens when I think it's like 38-10 at that point. But go look at his stats. He's got a significant number of forced fumbles, at least one in pretty much every stop he's made in the NFL. For these guys to be signed either to the A practice squad or in the case of Jamal Adams, possibly the roster, low risk and some reward potential here, if you ask me. Of the guys who've been signed recently, I think David Long is the better player of everyone, just based on the film that I had seen, although it certainly had not worked out recently for him in Miami. So any or all of these guys could be gone in 4 to 5, 6 weeks if other players return healthy. At this point in time, there's so many injuries, even at the DB level. I forgot about them in our Lions Discord. We were talking. I actually forgot completely that Emmanuel Mosley wasn't active last week, number one. Number two, that CD3 didn't play at all. These depth signings, if you ask me, are a little bit more important than just calling them depth pieces. It gives possibly the Lions coaching staff an opportunity to rest certain guys strategically down the stretch if they want to. It's quite possible that the Packers come into Detroit on Thursday and win the football game and throw a wrench into everyone's plans, which is to stay one game ahead of the Eagles for as long as possible for the NFC lead, and also stay one step or possibly two ahead of the Minnesota Vikings for the NFC North Division title. In my opinion, these guys, while they might not have a ton of impact immediately on the field, we shouldn't minimize or not provide ample credit to Brad Holmes and the front office for what they did here, which is give the defensive staff more options to use in the actual game, number one, and number two, give the coaching staff globally an opportunity to sit certain guys strategically. And if you keep these players on the practice squad, then you get 3 elevations where you don't have to move them to the active roster. But unfortunately, if you sign them from someone's practice squad, I believe they have to go to your active roster immediately. So therein lies the difference for some of these guys that were signed as free agents off the street, Jamal Adams and David Long, versus players that were brought over from another team's practice squad. I still think that these are very astute, prepared, and appropriate signings by Brad Holmes and his staff. You're welcome to disagree with me and let me know whatever you think of Jamal Adams and Quan Alexander being veterans who haven't had an impact from a splash play perspective here recently in their career. I think these are at least guys who can be serviceable if they had to be on the field for an extended period of time as a result of injury to someone else, which we don't want to hear about clearly at this point. Appreciate you guys' time, man. And let me know what you think of the video, the way that I structured the plays to illustrate what these guys are capable of, the specific areas I think they can help, most particularly Jamal Adams. He's certainly the controversial signing, and one that I think Lions fans will hear a lot of consternation and criticism from other fan bases about how ineffective he is at this point as an NFL player. If you think other Lions fans would enjoy my thoughts, the film that I showed, and my commentary on each of these individual pieces that Brad Holmes has brought into the roster, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.